Hi, everybody. Welcome to Half and Half this morning. Glad to have you here on a lovely fall Saturday. It's kind of warmish here in Madison and Blue Mounds. We've had unseasonably sunny weather this last week, which has been really pretty. And also, as I was driving out here, we've had really pretty fall colors as I was driving around out here. So we get both, which is really fun right now. Um, so what we're looking at today is the sacrum, and that's sometimes referred to as the sacred bone, as Scott put into the chat, because it comes from that root, the idea of sacred within that bone. So the sacrum is a triangle-shaped bone in your pelvis. So I've got these two pelvic halves, and then right in the middle is my sacrum, and it makes a little bit of a triangle there. And then down at the bottom of the sacrum is my tailbone that goes way underneath. And then my sacrum is going to attach to my first lumbar vertebra, which is my spine, my lower back vertebra. So I've got that sacrum bone that sits in the pelvis. It attaches to the spine, and it also attaches to the pelvis. So it's this through line that the weight of my spine drops onto my sacrum and then down through my hip joints and into my feet. So I've got this singular coming down and then this kind of weight distribution that falls off. So if I had an apple that I was washing in a stream of water, right? Like that stream would be coming down and then it would go around the apple, right? So we have this flow of weight, this flow of energy that's going straight down and then gets distributed through our two legs from this 1 to 2 that way. So very important in carrying our weight and dealing with our posture and feeling our weight down through our feet. Now, one thing you might have heard of is the SI joint. Sometimes people have trouble in their SI joint, and maybe you've had that or you've heard of that. And that joint is the sacroiliac joint. So it is where the sacrum meets the ilium or ilia, which is a fancy name for the pelvic bones. So it is where the sacrum connects to the pelvic bones. So it is in that place where you distribute the weight down into 2 feet. And it's really tricky. It's held in by ligaments, but sometimes those ligaments are a little loose. And they need to be a little loose because you should have a tiny bit of movement in there as you walk and sit and stand and different things. There should be a little bit of give, but sometimes there's a little too much give. And so the pelvis gets a little twisted, a little funky. The muscles grab in a weird way. And you get that SI joint slip, right? You get out of alignment in your SI joint. And so it is held in place by ligaments, but also the muscles in the hips sometimes can pull the pelvis in a way that makes it get kind of slipped out of place there too. So there's a lot going on with that, right? Like how do I deal with the SI joint maybe being a little twisted, a little off? It can cause some back pain. It can cause some pain down in the hips. Sometimes it's related to how sciatica or something like sciatica happens. Like all sorts of things can result in that SI joint being a little out or a little tight through that place. And then where the sacrum attaches to the lower back, the lumbar spine, that also can be, kind of compressed too. And that lumbar spine pain or lumbar tension, then where those two things meet, sometimes the sacrum gets kind of pulled up into the lower back, into the sacrum there. So there's all these different ways that connection place, that kind of hub exchange of energy and weight, it can get like a little twisted up with our posture that way. So we're just going to kind of see what we can do to let some tension go around the back of the pelvis, to let some tension go through the lower back and maybe through the hips a little bit, and then engage some of the lower abdominal muscles instead. And that lower abdominal support can be kind of the place that stabilizes the sacrum, right? Like you're wrapping, sometimes people wear those belts, those like sacrum belts to help them, right? Your lower abdominals could become part of that like organic belt in there. So I said 2 things. 1 is to release the tension. 2 is to turn the muscles on. Sometimes we do just one of those things, and it's not helpful to do one. You really have to do both. If I just start working my abdominals and I still have all this other tension and this kind of pulled out of place, jammed up sacrum, doesn't make things better. Sometimes it makes things worse. If I just relax everything and nothing else comes on to support that, that's no good either, right? Sometimes it slips a little more, or I just get even more tension on the other side. So we're going to think about both of those things. So it's very complicated for a half and half class day, isn't it? But that was the task I was giving. I asked Scott what to do, and he said the sacrum. So we're going to do it. And we're going to simplify it, I think. We'll figure it out. So lying on your back, and let's start with the image of the back of the pelvis. So it's nice when you're lying on your back because you have feedback on the back of your pelvis. You can feel how that relates to the floor. And a lot of times I'll say, just let your pelvis be heavy, or let your hips be heavy, or feel the back of your pelvis, any of those things. And that's already starting to get into some of this. So we'll start with that. Notice where the back of your pelvis contacts the floor. This is a little different for everybody. There's no one way it has to be. Some people will feel their glutes a little more. Some people will actually feel that sacrum bone a little more. So just notice what you have. You might feel one side a little heavier than the other side, or a little tighter than the other side. Sometimes that's the case. And then just breathing, and imagine you spread out the back of the pelvis. And some of the muscles on the surface, like your glute muscles or maybe your lower back muscles, they start to let go. Just kind of settle, let the pelvis drop into the floor. You don't need those muscles to hold your pelvis in this moment. And then see if you can be a little more specific with your image. Right? So we start with a really broad image, back of the pelvis. We go a little more specific. We kind of zoom in just a little. And can you feel the bones? One hip bone, pelvic bone, the other pelvic bone, and the sacrum bone in the middle. Maybe you have a clear picture of that in your mind. Maybe you've looked at a skeleton recently and you have a picture of that. That's great. You can use that to help you visualize better. Maybe you don't. Maybe this is the first time you've ever thought about it and you just have the picture of me kind of pointing it out. And that is totally useful as well. You don't have to know exactly what it looks like anatomically. Your body can translate. So if you just think, okay, triangle down in the back center of my pelvis, and then one side and the other side bones. That works too. And as you visualize those bones, just imagine they get a little heavier. As muscles relax, you become dead weight. So the bones actually feel heavier, they sink a little more. And you might even feel that connection between the sacrum and the pelvic bones, that SI joint place. Maybe you have a sense of where that is, of where they connect. Again, it might be pretty specific, or it might be a little bit general. But can you feel kind of that area, or imagine the area where those bones connect? And settling through that space. And then if we went one layer deeper, we would get to some of the hip rotator muscles, and a muscle maybe you've heard of, the piriformis muscle. So I've got glutes on the outside. I can touch my glutes. Then I have bones. And then inside, on the inside part of the pelvis bone, there's this piriformis muscle. So all you have to think of is just like, I'm just going to scoot one layer deeper and imagine muscles are releasing in my pelvis. There's one that goes from the sacrum to the outside of the hip on the right, from the sacrum to the outside of the hip on the left. All you really have to think is, I'm just going to breathe in a layer deeper. Just going to think of relaxing inside the pelvis. And for me, all of this makes my pelvis feel a little wider and a little flatter. So now we're going to come around to the other thing I said we needed, release the muscles, then engage the belly. So from hip bone to hip bone, if you take your fingers, put them on that bony part of your hip, right in the front, that you think of as like, if you put your hands on your hips, if you went to that front side of that bone, right there. And from hip bone to hip bone, and kind of down towards your pubic bone, that's what I would call your lower belly. This area inside the pelvis, below your navel, and in the pelvis, that sort of lower belly place. So that's where your deep lower abdominals live. Hopefully your abdominals are not in your throat, but I think they're probably down in your pelvis. And so ever so gently, you're just going to exhale and imagine those muscles turn on. Now, if I turn them on really zealously, really like, oh, I'm going to make them work, I'm probably going to tighten all that hip stuff we just let go of. So stay kind of gentle when you start. Breathe in and then exhale and just imagine that space down low gets a little wider, gets a little flatter. And towards the end of your exhale, a little bit of tone in your belly, right? Not gripping, not grabbing, just a little tone, a little support through there. Let it go on your inhale. Play with that feeling a little bit. You could put your fingers there if it's helpful to feel the belly drop down. Thinking of the low belly getting wider, flatter, and deeper. Let it go as you inhale. Find it as you exhale. And then after a couple times of doing that, check in with the sacrum again, the backside of the pelvis again. How does that feel? Does it still feel relaxed? Does it feel like it got super tight again? Does it feel like it got a little tighter again? Sometimes a little tighter is okay, right? You're just like negotiating the balance. But see what can you do as the belly comes on? What's the balance between the belly coming on without creating more tension in the back of the pelvis? Where's the relationship there? Now, we're going to need just a little more effort from your lower belly. So we start into knee folds. As you do that, it starts the same, a little bit of work in the low belly, but then it just has to work a little harder to lift your right leg up and then to lower your right leg back down, still working the deep low belly. Same thing with the left leg. Let's do an exhale, find it, lift the leg, and then back down. So alternating that side to side. And often I talk about keeping your pelvis really steady as you do this, not letting it tip to the right or tip to the left. And that is about your SI joint, your sacrum, your deep low belly, all those things working together. Back of the pelvis heavy and broad, low belly engages, holding the pelvis in place as you take a leg up and down. And the first thing is just to notice, right? Even if you can't hold your pelvis perfectly steady, it's just to notice that that's happening. So if your pelvis is tipping over to the right, you could think of the left side of your belly working harder to prevent that. If your pelvis is tipping over to the left, you could think of the right side of your belly working harder to prevent that. If your pelvis is steady and your belly is really working, you got a sense of really getting that. Check in with your sacrum. Is it tense there? Is it your lower back tensing up? You could refine that a little bit if that's happening. Or maybe it's all working great, which is excellent too. One more set, right and left. And then with both feet on the floor, next time you're there, just kind of let everything do whatever it wants for a moment, right? You can kind of move it around if you want, or sometimes it feels better to not move it around, but just to hang out and breathe. And notice how things feel. We're going to pay attention to some of those same things as we do the mini crunch. Hands behind your head, elbows up towards the ceiling. Nice, broad, heavy back of the pelvis. Find the deep, low belly. Now, all the time in mini crunch, we talk about the ribs connecting. We're going to do that too, but we're going to add in this pelvis attention, pelvic awareness. Bringing your head up, hold it here. Take a breath. And as you exhale, deep, low belly. Nice, broad, heavy pelvis. It comes up a little higher. Lowering back down. Now, especially on this one, sometimes the glutes really come on and your pelvis will actually tip up towards the ceiling as your head comes up. So figure out where your pelvis is. Exhale, use your belly, use your ribs, bring your head up, and then just do a check-in. Did it tip and lift up? Or is it in place where it started? Can you go a little more into all that? And back down. I'll take 2 more of those. Using the exhale to find it all a little more. And then as you come down, stretch your legs out. Let everything relax. So sometimes when I would teach in-person classes, I would just come up to sitting and look at everybody just lying and relaxing. And I think I was sort of imagining I was doing that as I came up to sitting this time, like, okay, everybody just relax. So you can stay on your back. If you were mirroring me and you came up to sitting, you can go back onto your back. And just let your legs go straight out. And yeah, see how things feel. How do your legs fall open? How does your upper back feel? And we're going to use that same image to do single leg circles. It's a lot of what single leg circles is about. Single leg circles is very similar to knee folds. We just take that action of one leg up, moving around while the pelvis stays steady. And we make the movement of that leg bigger and harder. So the pelvis, all this stuff is challenged more. So let's start with your legs together, right in line with your pelvis, your feet flexed. And then see what it's like. Like, where is when I bring my legs together, my glutes come on a little bit. It's not the worst thing, but like, check in. Did your lower back grab to do that? Maybe you don't need that. Maybe you could use the lower belly a little more to hold that position. And then right leg's going to come up. You can hold the back of your leg if you want. Notice what happens. Most of us, me included, when my right leg comes up, my pelvis tips over to the right. Little bit. So even now, just to hold the right leg up, I'm going to think of that left side of the belly. I'm going to imagine both sides of the pelvis are evenly weighted, using the belly to hold that just kind of changing weight. The weight is now distributed differently with the leg up. And so especially when the right leg's up, I tend to focus on the left side of the lower belly a little more. It's hard to keep that left side of the pelvis in place. Everything really wants to go to the right for a lot of this. So I'm going to keep working on that as I go into leg circles. However much you want to bend your knee, it's just fine. We're really focused on the pelvis. So we go over to the left, down, and even now I have to start thinking left side of the belly. And especially as the leg opens a little bit, I have to really work that left side of the belly so my pelvis doesn't tip over. I'm showing a pretty exaggerated tip over. We're going to see if you could just keep it from tipping at all. Back to center, very, very precise. Reaching across, left side of the belly. Keeps the pelvis in place. And then as you finish this time, we're going to take a small reset before you do the other side. Take the leg down, or sorry, not before you do the other side, before you do the reverse direction. Take your right leg down, take a moment. Find your evenness through both halves of the pelvis. A little bit of low belly tone. Comes on a little more even as the leg comes up. Left side has to work a little more as the leg reaches up. So especially this opening, I don't open very far. It's very small because I really want to keep that left hip totally in place. And across. Deep left side of the belly. And across and up. It's amazing how much work you can get out of a small movement if you are working very deeply. So smaller isn't easier or harder per se. Smaller is good for challenging very, very deep, specific muscles. Bigger is typically better for challenging whole body or whole groups of muscles coming on together. So just different needs, different effects. And then right leg comes down. Let it all hang out for a moment. See where you landed. And then a little bit of tone in the belly brings your legs together, feet flex. Notice right side, left side. Bring the left leg up. Maybe your pelvis wants to tip one direction or the other. See if you can keep it pretty steady. Probably engaging the right side of the belly a little more. Leg goes up. And then leg goes over to the right, across, around and up. Wide, heavy back of the pelvis. Deep low belly work. And if all this is coming pretty well for you, then you can kind of look around elsewhere, right? If your low belly's working and the back of your pelvis, oh, that's good. Well, what's going on with your ribs? Are they also helping out and sinking and drawing together? What's going on in your neck? Is it getting tense? Can you let that go? So you can keep kind of checking in other places if you've got this working pretty well. If you don't have it working well, don't start looking around, right? Like just keep focused. Let's go to the reverse. Right side has to work hard right away. Two more. and then resting that leg and resting everything down. And bring yourself up to sitting. Okay, so we have this possibility of a wide back of the pelvis, drawing the belly in the front. And then another thing I talked about is how sometimes the lower back grabs and kind of pulls everything up. The spine gets compressed. So we're going to take one more image, and that's to think about getting the lower back to maybe release a little, and as it does, dropping weight into the sacrum, sacrum dropping into the pelvis really nicely, and then that's how I get that kind of split. So especially if you're someone who is not me, I am the opposite of this. I'm kind of a tuck or flat back person. But for a lot of people, you have that kind of sway back, people who have that sway back and like pretty well developed glutes. For that person, a lot of times that lower back can be really pulling up, and it's like pulling your weight up into your back and not letting it rest down on your thighs and in your sacrum. So especially for those people, thinking of the lower back letting go a little bit, imagining not the whole pelvis, but just the sacrum like slides down into place a little more, right? It's like the lower back muscles want to pull the sacrum up out of the pelvis. You're going to let it just sink with the low belly working, with the broad back of the pelvis. Now we're going to use that to make our little rolling like a ball shape. So instead of just spine, right? Instead of just butt pelvis, we're going to go, okay, nice open lower back because the sacrum is sliding down and then it's sliding underneath. And in the end, we get that open back of the pelvis feeling. And hopefully, a little more release through the lower back. Like all those vertebrae could decompress. Holding onto your knees. Knees are a little open. Belly draws in a little more. That's how you flip, or not flip. That's how you get back a little bit. Float back. I think I was going to say float the feet up. Tipping back a little. Float and tip. I think that's what I was trying to say. And then toes reaching back to the floor. That deep low belly works. Back stays open. Back of the pelvis stays broad. So it's up to you. You could do a full rolling like a ball. You could try that out if you want. I'm going to stay with this little rocking chair movement. So either one would be fine, whichever feels like it might be interesting to you and give you a better sense of what's happening. Just like in the last exercise, I'm checking on the pelvis and the images in the pelvis and the lower back and the sacrum first. That's my main goal. And then secondarily, I might check in elsewhere, like, oh, my jaw's really grabbing. I'm going to let that go. Or something like that. And then as you come up this time, let's work your way up to standing. Coming onto your hands and feet. Take a little stretch up. And then all those same images apply. Nice open, wide back of the pelvis. Low belly drawing in just a little. And then the tailbone sliding down, the sacrum sliding down. Bend your knees. Let your lower back open. And the sacrum just keeps dropping in order to roll up to standing. Now, we are going to flip. We're going to flip teachers. So we'll see where Scott goes.
Hello, everybody. So I'm going to continue this thread, but for the short term, I'm going to take a little bit of a side trip. And so let's start off with feet wide apart. And then take your left foot in and your right foot out. And this is especially for DS. You described that you'd sprained your knee. So this knee, as you bend, make sure it goes straight out over your toes. And keep that alignment as you straighten. Now to add the breathing in. Exhale, bending. Inhale, straightening. So what makes this alignment possible is this external rotation in the thigh. External rotation as you bend. External rotation as you straighten. So let's do a couple more like that. This can be really nice to wake up the ankle, wake up the hip, articulate the knee. Then turning back toward the front. And then the second side, turn your right foot in and then your left foot out. So here's that external rotation. Keep that external rotation as you bend. Keep that external rotation as you straighten. And so we'll go up and down a few times. You may be wondering, what does this have to do with the sacrum? Not much. I mean, maybe obliquely. That sometimes if the hip socket is not able to fully move and articulate, the stress either goes down into the knees or up into the sacrum. So let's do a few more of these movements, making sure first and foremost your knee is tracking in a healthy way. And then getting the value added of mobilizing your hip socket, mobilizing your ankle. Exhale, bend. Inhale, straighten. And then turning back to the front. So now we're going to take both legs and turn them out a little bit, not as much as you did before. So this is the technique that does have a lot of benefit for the sacrum. Keeping that external rotation, exhale, ankles bend, hips bend, and knees bend. And then inhale, coming up, keeping that external rotation. Exhale, bending. Inhale, straightening. Now, especially on the bending phase, whether you feel it or not, at least to some extent, the pelvic floor muscles are yielding. Now, to continue the thread Collette began, with the exhale, letting your sitting bones slide away from your sacrum. Let the back of the pelvis broaden. Now let's do a couple more like that. The next time you're in that triple flex position, pausing there, and bring your hands into the prayer position. So now we're going to work with the muscles of the pelvic floor through the feet. Start by lifting both heels up. Feel how your belly engages. Keeping the back of your pelvis sacrum relaxed and a sense of spaciousness. We've had the heels lifted for a while, haven't we? Now, over a count of 5, slowly descending both your heels down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Contact. Exhale. Come up with the inhale. And then stepping your feet together. So now we're going to use a partial yoga sun salutation to make our way to the floor. Begin with the inhale to loosen your upper back. Exhale, arms to the side up. Inhale, folding. Exhale, gorilla. Inhale, stepping back. So here we are in downward facing dog pose. Few deep breaths. Lengthen the out breath. Deepen the in breath. Lengthen the out breath. Deepen the in breath. One more like that. And then coming down. And then making your way onto your back. So we discussed a little bit already that we're looking to engage the belly, especially really down deeply. And you now have a few tools in which to accomplish that. And then letting the sacrum area release into broadening. So now let's put those two together. Start by taking your lower back, pressing it to the floor. And notice how your pelvis tips posteriorly. So let's take a few breaths here, and just like you worked on previously, see if you can keep your belly engaged and let the back of your pelvis, your sacrum area, relax. Now, we could spend maybe 10, 15, 20 minutes here nuancing this work. It could probably be pretty interesting for some of us. But let's keep moving. So keeping that posterior pelvic tilt as you lift your pelvis up and then segment by segment your lower back. And for the time being, let's not go super high up. Now, where your lower back, your lumbar spine meets your sacrum is a place where people often have a misalignment. And what happens is the lower back is forward and the sacrum is backward. So use this positioning here. Maybe you're already feeling how your sacrum is lifting up toward the ceiling. And now let your lower back relax toward the floor. And let's spend a few breaths here. And then rolling down. See if you can feel segment by segment, mobilizing your spine. And we'll take a few breaths here. So to summarize, what we just did was sacrum in, let your lower back release backwards. So step by step again. Step one, take your lower back to the floor. So that initiates the process. Lower back, back. Then the posterior pelvic tilt, at least to some small extent. Sacrum forward or interior. And keeping that posterior tilt to your pelvis as you lift your hips up, not super high up. And let's pause here. So by the positioning of your pelvis, sacrum is lifting up toward the ceiling, isn't it? Imagine your very lowest lumbar vertebra, lumbar 5, is relaxing into the back of your body. And let's hold here for 3 more breaths. And then slowly lowering down. All right, we're going to come back to this idea. Let's now return to hands and knees, to dog pose. So hands and knees, en route to the dog pose. So there's that wall back behind you. Can you see it? So take your hips back toward that wall, not by moving your hands, keep your hands put, but by opening up your shoulders and lengthening your spine. Now keep your hips moving toward that wall back there behind you, and now stretch the top of your head toward your thumbs. Feel how that lengthens your neck. And keeping your neck long, keeping your hips moving back behind you. So you slowly slide your gaze forward in front of you, creating between the shoulder blades what's called thoracic extension. I like to call this alternate upward facing dog. Holding here for a count of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Then letting your head hang. Regular, old, usual, typical head down dog. Between your shoulder blades, fully fill there with the inhale. Exhale, walk your feet forward. Very similar movement in the upper back, gorilla. Inhale, folding. All the way up. Exhale, all the way up. Inhale, arms down. All right, we'll take a few breaths here. So we have that little bit longer out breath and deeper in breath. So maybe you're already feeling, how that out breath connects you to your belly. And how that in breath can help loosen up that tension that's so common between the shoulder blades. So now let's make our way to the floor again. Begin with the in-breath to loosen your upper back. Exhale, arms to the side, up. Inhale, folding. Exhale, gorilla. Inhale, dog. And we'll take a few breaths here. And then with the exhale, coming down to your knees. And then down to your belly. So let's begin with your hands right next to your armpits. And let your elbows relax. Now to create length in your lower back, stretch your toes back behind you. And then at the same time, reach the crown of your head forward in front of you. Now remember how we did thoracic extension in that version of dog pose a few moments ago? With the next exhale, the same movement in your upper back. Such that your gaze comes a little bit in front of you. We'll take a few breaths here. And then coming back down. Toes back, head forward. Now with the next out breath, thoracic extension like we did before. But now add a layer in. Next exhale, lift your belly up off the floor. So you look a little bit more forward. A few breaths here. And then coming down. Now pushing up to your hands and knees. And then back to downward dog position. 3 deep breaths here. And then coming down to your knees. And returning to your back. Back to your back. So let's review what we did in bridge pose a few minutes ago. Start by taking your lower back back and taking your sacrum forward. Then continue that trajectory to lift your hips a little bit, a few inches, all you need. And then practice here the feeling of your sacrum moving into your body as your lower back moves into the space behind you. We'll take a few more breaths here, letting this feeling steep into your body. And then slowly coming down. So it's one thing to hear words and understand them in your head. It's something altogether different to remember in your body what the words represent. Let's do this one more time. Lower back, back, sacrum anterior. Then continue that trajectory as you lift your hips up. And a few breaths here to take a snapshot. Sacrum anterior, lower back posterior. Holding here for kind of 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then coming down. All right, so now let's make our way to hands and knees and route to dog pose. So here's another opportunity to let your lower back sacral area broaden. Two more deep breaths. And coming down to your knees and down to your belly. So first step, length. Toes back, head forward. Now remember that sense of sacrum moving into your body anterior and lower back moving back posterior? Well, that's where we're headed. With the next exhale, lift your head and upper chest, thoracic extension. Now with the next exhale, sacrum moves in, lower back moves back. Yeah, it's the same thing we did a few minutes ago, isn't it? Holding here, steady breathing. And then coming back down. So let's add a little bit of intrigue to that. Bring your hands forward. Starting off with your hands about shoulder width, maybe a little bit wider, with a little bend in your elbows, and your elbows a little bit up off the floor. So where we're headed is not what's sometimes called the Sphinx pose. That's something entirely different. Now with the next exhale, lift your head and upper chest. And keep stretching your toes back, crown of your head forward. Now with the next out breath, take your sacrum anterior and your lower back posterior. And maybe you have to bring your hands in a little bit closer to come up higher. Belly up off the floor. Holding, holding, holding. Coming down. Hand on top of hand, forehead on hand. 3 deep breaths. So now let's take that version of Cobra one more time. So hands a little bit wider than shoulder, elbows a little bit lifted, a little bit bent. And as you reach your toes back, pull the crown of your head forward. Exhale, first step thoracic extension. Pause here for the in-breath. Now with the next exhale, sacrum in, lower back, back. Steady breathing. And then coming down, hand on top of hand, forehead on hand. 3 deep breaths. Then bring your hands back beside your ribs. This can help strengthen your arms, your back, your chest. Press up to hands and knees. And then back to downward dog. 3 deep breaths here. And then coming down to your knees. And then making your way to your back. And we'll take a few moments here for guided relaxation. You could rest on the floor if you'd like, or a recliner, or a sofa. Knees could stay bent like mine are, or you could outstretch your legs, your choice. And then if you feel comfortable doing so, close your eyes. So this alignment approach to working with the body can be the best of times, it can be the worst of times. So not to be too dramatic, but in moderation, lightly held, alignment work can be so beneficial. But if overdone, it can become an expression of anxiety. So we're going to take a few moments here to relax your forehead and your jaw, your neck, and your belly. So what we've done is we've implanted a lot of information into your body. Now the anxiety part of our mind is going to want to hold on to it. So best you can, relax your forehead, your jaw, your neck, and your belly. And all the various techniques, cues, As best you can, let them go. We've implanted a lot of information in the body. And so there's no small amount of trust here or faith that your body will take what's useful and beneficial and let the other stuff fall away. Now, if you've closed your eyes, opening your eyes. And then as you feel ready, coming up to sitting. All right. Super glad you could join us today. If you have any comments or questions, feel free to type them into the chat. If you're new to what we do, Pilates on Harrison, we have a comprehensive group of classes. We do some cardio, some strength, some Pilates, more yoga-based movements, bar classes, fusion of yoga and Pilates. We have a monthly subscription, unlimited access to all our classes. So please check it out. Be great if you could join us. Any comments, questions this morning? I'm seeing a shake in the head, no. Super glad that we can connect, and let's do this again really soon. Thank you.